The Writer's Dossier Podcast is a proud member of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network.
Hi, everybody. I'm Terrence McCauley, and this is my Writer's Dossier.
No writers were harmed in the production of this podcast.
Hey everybody, this is Jeff Circle with the Writer's Dossier Podcast. I'm here with my pal, Terrence McCauley. We've been chatting before the call, and I had to hit record because we don't want to miss a thing from this conversation. So Terrence, thanks for joining and welcome to the Writer's Dossier.
Well, thanks for having me on again, pal. I appreciate it.
Well, you and I have this funny back and forth with podcasts. Everyone who's listening recognizes Terrence's voice. And if you're watching on YouTube, everybody knows Terrence McCauley, Spies, Lies, and Private Eyes. And I've hijacked your show to interview you for Chicago 63. You've had me on your show just to talk about crazy stuff. And now you are the first time on the Writer's Dossier podcast. And it's my honor to interview you and give you some elevate and illuminate, is a little theme around here, for your new book coming out called The TWILIGHT TOWN.
Well, thanks for having me on, my friend. And the Twilight Town has been a labor of love for me for the last couple of years. I plan on it being the first book in a trilogy. That is the Dallas 63 trilogy. It started off with Chicago 63 as kind of like a prequel, which was a book about the original plot to kill JFK in Chicago a few weeks before Dallas. That book was also taken from this book, which is The Twilight Town. And the reason why was because I loved the characters that appeared in what ultimately became Chicago 63. But after the event in Chicago, I didn't have a role for the protagonist anymore. The protagonist, who was a Secret Service agent by the name of Abraham Golden in my book. So I was really bummed that I loved this character, but I had to say goodbye to him about a quarter of the way into the book. So instead of letting that happen, I put the events of that part of the book into its own novella and kept the rest of the book humming along. And that's what The Twilight Town is about. It is
Twilight Town.
Right. The Twilight Town, a Dallas 63 novel. It is about
love it.
Thank you. It is about the months that were leading up to the JFK assassination from February of 63 all the way through November 22nd, 1963. But it takes a different tact in that other books have talked about the broader conspiracy, the international implications. This novel talks about the event as a crime that took place on the streets of Dallas from the perspective of three cops. And I figured since I'm a crime writer, that would be the best way to approach this kind of well-known story.
Well, Twilight Town is said to be one hell of a story, and I'm saying that from other people who are talking about it. In fact, Dossier member Bruce Borges said that it just keeps getting better and better. So after all the books written about the Kennedy assassination, what is it about your book that makes it such a compelling read? You touched on it a little bit from the February thing, and I think that's really cool because everybody knows back into the left. Everybody knows the grassy knoll. Jack Ruby. But yours is Bruce couldn't get over it. I think that same theme keeps coming up. Even though people have read about Kennedy or have seen the shows and the movies, this is different. Why should people get into this story? It seems to be such a hot topic right now.
Right. It is a hot topic, and it's one that's interested me for a long time, even way before the recent bout of disclosures that came from the federal government. And, I always looked into a lot of the things that people latch on to, like ancient aliens or Bigfoot or UFOs, things like that.
Sasquatch. We got a Sasquatch down the road. He's always walking. He's like this.
Yeah, always the same gait too, right? And ancient aliens, things like that. And I've always said, I can find a good explanation for all of those. And the Kennedy assassination, however, the more you dig into it, the more questions arise, and questions that aren't easily explained away. So with this book, I focus not on just Dealey Plaza. That happens at the end of the book. but more about explaining the conspiracy from a Dallas level. And when you look at the secondary people, the tertiary characters that were involved with Oswald, you get to see that there were just too many coincidences for all of these people to have just been innocent bystanders. There was one of the people who investigated it for the House investigations in the 70s said there's the fingerprints of intelligence are all over this guy. And it was so true. That's what my book focuses on. It focuses on the people that you might not have heard of, but you definitely need to know about, and in a crime setting. So it's not the grand conspiracy. It's not the CIA and the FBI in cigar smoke-filled rooms. It's more about what I think it really was, which was a crime that people who had the means and opportunity to pull off did so.
Well, in all this research that you've done for this book and all the research together that you've done on this topic in general, is there one thing that made you sit up, hair on the back of your neck rises, and you just said, holy shit, wow? Is there anything like that? It's like, people need to know about this. I got to figure a way to get in the book.
Right. Yeah, I did. There were a couple of people, especially the people who were involved in intelligence before and after the event. The very people that Marina Oswald was staying with had deep ties to American intelligence before and after the event. One of the investigating officers, William Westbrook, wound up working for the CIA in Vietnam after this event. The jacket that was found under the one of the cars in the parking lot after Tippit got shot was traced back to somebody who was a Ruby associate, not Oswald. So those things together, the more I dug, the more I kept going and saying, God, this isn't just interesting. There's a novel here. And why make it a novel instead of a nonfiction book? Because I'm a novelist, plain and simple.
You are a novelist, and you've written a lot of Westerns too. Did that help you in any way writing a setting in Dallas, Texas? Your background and knowledge of the Western setting?
Right. It did definitely prepare me for the mindset that is part of the Deep South and the West, that kind of pioneer spirit, that kind of belief in yourself and not necessarily in other people coming to help you out. And that is what the three cops in this book have in common. They're all ambitious and they're all trying to find their own way to success, however they define it. Also, writing Westerns helped me do a better job of having the right kind of research, knowing when to cut it off and knowing when to go down the rabbit hole. Because as you know, and your listeners and viewers know, there's no shortage of information out there about the assassination. So writing Westerns, writing something in a historical context really prepared me to cull out what I could include and what was fun, but not useful to the story.
Okay. All right. So what will people find surprising about this book? Will it be something about the history and the research that they'll find fascinating? You use the word coincidence, which we'll talk about later. Will it be something from history in your research, or will it be something completely made up that will make the reader's eye just go wide?
I think there's a lot of stuff that I found in history that I included here that will make the reader sit up and say, I didn't know that, and run to their smartphone or to their desktop and look it up on Google. And I encourage everybody to do that. I did change some of the names because I didn't want people who are so familiar with this story to say, well, that didn't happen, or so-and-so wasn't there at that time.
Terrence McCauley wasn't there.
Right, exactly right. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. I didn't want to get caught up in that. Otherwise, I would have written a nonfiction book. But right. I did use a lot of the stuff that has been declassified over the last few years. The book was already mostly written when the recent declassification came out. But it didn't, all that did was reinforce what I had already presented in the book. And this book is different because it has a clipped style. There isn't a lot of exposition here. I fold in the facts into the story as the story evolves. So there's no big exposition that's going to make people get bored or look away. I try to keep them as engaged as possible. And thank God the early reviews have borne that out.
They have. The reviews have been fantastic. And, you know, our pal Brad Thor does this thing called faction, where he takes facts and he turns them into fiction. And do you, in this book, help us at all? Maybe at the end, where there's a glossary of terms, or at least something that says, hey, guess what? That part right there, that's real. And here's the reference. I mean, I know you're not a nonfiction now, writer, and there's not a bibliography like you would in a term paper, but do you do that anywhere to help us out, to like separate any of that, and maybe at the end of the book so we don't get any spoilers?
Sure. I did that with Chicago 63 because I knew not a lot of people knew about that plot. So I wanted to have a little bit of clarity there. For this one, since it's a trilogy, I haven't done that for the Twilight Town, but I may do that at the end of the third book in the trilogy, because I think that will help people understand the enormity and scope of what I was trying to do. If I do it now, they might say, all right, I've got enough, and then go away. They certainly can Google a lot of the stuff that I mentioned in there, and they'll find plenty of justification for how I explain events.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for that. Are you on the presidential distro for the DOJ's distro for all of this, the trickle, what is now the trickle effect of information is coming out of the White House or the DOJ or the CIA? How current have you been pulling information? And did you face a situation where you're 60,000 words into the book and then all this information comes out and there's new documents to review and you're like, oh God, did any of that happen?
It actually, all of the stuff that came out was stuff that I had already researched from secondary and third sources. I dug deep into different articles that I found that weren't necessarily from the New York Times, but were from other sources. Like there was a local Chicago magazine that was published in '79 that talked about the plot in Chicago. And that opened my eyes to an awful lot. It's very difficult to find one place that has all of the information all in one area that's digestible. And the interesting thing about this latest batch of disclosure was that the stuff hit the web and everyone said, they went right to Grok, they went to their AI, and they said, well, what does it tell me? And AI said, well, it doesn't say anything new, because they were images of documents. Well, somebody has since gone and made them PDFs. So they're searchable text now. So now when you see it, if you run that same search, you'll get a lot of different things. And late last week, there was also confirmation from CIA sources that they did know about Oswald and they did cover it up, which is something that I had learned a long time ago just by reading publicly sourced information. So the information is there, but it's spread out over so many things, and you only know what is good to keep and what is good to reject if you have a broader sense of what's going on, and that takes time.
Okay. Here's an easy yes or no question for you. In all this research that you've done, have you had anyone from the government come to you and want to talk to you about what you're doing?
I've had that in the past. I did have somebody show up at one of my book signings for my university series who was sitting there listening to me. I didn't know him. The guy vibed cop from here to Sunday. He even had a lapel pin. And when I got close to ask him, does he want a signed copy of the book? He told one of the people at the mysterious bookshop, he said, no, I've already read it. And then he left. I also, for Chicago 63, I did have the relatives of one of the people I mentioned in the book reach out to me. And that was a little eye-opening too. Yeah, I'll tell you about that off camera. And he just said, you talked about my uncle, and he always claimed he didn't have anything to do with it. I want to know why you're talking about him now. And my answer was that it is a fiction book that is based on fact. And that was a little eye-opening. But, one can get paranoid too. There was one time when I was writing a piece for the Twilight Town. It was just talking about the conspiracy, and my computer went dead.
Weird.
And I said, oh my God, they're on to me. They're watching me. They're firing a shot across my bow. What happened was I rolled my chair over the plug and it came out of the wall 2 hours before. And the entire time I was writing on battery and the battery died. There was no, it was just me being stupid. But yeah, I mean, they do watch all this stuff. They do read this stuff. And I think as long as there's nothing that's really top secret or concerning or live, they pretty much leave it alone. And thank God I haven't wound up in Guantanamo yet. So.
Now, you don't have a prior military history of being in the service, do you?
No,
Okay.
I don't, but I did work for New York State government for 25 years
did.
in transportation and economic development and infrastructure. So I understand how that world works. And I did work with a lot of people in the federal government and state government and county government. So I do, once you have that mindset of how they think, it's not that much of a leap to understand how they approach the world and how they would approach something like this.
Well, thankfully you didn't have to go through a governmental pre-publication review like a lot of people do.
That's exactly right. Thank God.
All right, this is the big question. Everybody, if you're driving, if you're watching, pay attention. Pull the car over and just hold on for this next question. Terrence McCauley, who killed Kennedy?
I think it was about 10 to 20 people who were pro-segregationists, a bit anti-communists, and the mafia, because they were all together trying to overthrow Cuba and get Cuba back for the boys, not just for their casinos, but also for stopping communism, for their heroin trade, and for their money laundering operations. So I think it was probably tied to people who knew General Walker. He's somebody that people will Google, Edwin Walker. He was a firebrand of his time, and he was involved with an awful lot of very shady people who could have pulled this off. That's what I think happened, and I make no secret of it in the book. It's how we get from point A to point B. That's where the magic is for my work.
Are we going to hear that from the government someday?
I don't think you will, because what you've seen, especially over the last week, is that the government was engaged in a cover-up, but I don't think it was beforehand. I think it was afterwards, because when the secrets of this and the details of this became clear, they realized we know some of these people. Some of these people have worked for us.
Yeah.
We can't have this. They're going to
rat them
blame
out.
us.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So we have to cut ties with them. And that pretty much is what is borne out by the records as they come out. I don't think you're ever going to see a crystal clear picture of the grassy knoll or anything. I think all of that stuff, if it ever existed, was way destroyed long before this. But I do think that it will, if you look at the background and you look at some of the people involved, you'll see that it wasn't just one shooter. It just doesn't make sense.
No, it does not make sense. Everybody rush out and grab the Twilight Town. It's out now. It comes out July 15th. Everybody's seriously, I know this is a popular topic, but we're talking Terrence McCauley here. So get to know him. Check out his writer's dossier. It's unclassified. It's unredacted. It's live at thewritersdossier.com, and go to terrencemccauley.com. Check out Terrence's amazing award-winning best-selling body of work of other books there too. And while you're at, just get them all. Please help Terrence out. But start with Chicago 63. Do the whole thing and get ready for the next installment. We can't wait for that to come out. Please, everybody, share this episode and follow Terrence McCauley on social media. Go to his website, subscribe, bells and buttons, all that stuff. We really appreciate it, and help support Terrence McCauley. And thank you to Authors on the Air Radio Network. And Terrence, thank you. Thank you for being a friend, a supporter of the dossier from the very beginning. And I can't wait to see you around next time. So
thank you,
have
pal.
anything,
I appreciate it.
Anywhere else that people need to follow you at? Like, what's the best place to keep up with what you're doing at?
Sure. www.terrencemccauley.com. That's 2 R's and all E's.
2 R's and all E's. Any social media that you prefer?
Sure. I'm on Facebook, Twitter. I'm also on Instagram, but Facebook and Twitter are the ones where most people find me.
Facebook and Twitter. There you go. Follow, like, subscribe, do all that. Help us out. And thanks again for joining us, everybody. Thanks, Terrence.
Thank you, pal.
You bet. The Dossier Podcast is a production of The Idea Academy.